Okay, great. This is Pacifica Radio, Capitalism, Race, and Democracy. I'm Polina Vasiliev. Russia has just held its regional elections earlier in September. Russians took to the polls to elect governors and other regional representatives. For the first time, residents of the Donbass region had a chance to participate in Russian elections. These are former Ukrainian territories whose majority ethnically Russian population voted to join the Russian Federation in 2022. This is Lugansk Popular Republic, Donetsk Popular Republic, Kherson, and Zaporozhie. My guest today is Sebastián Salgado, Argentinian journalist, filmmaker, director of the independent outlet Data Urgente, that's dataurgente.com, and most recently an election observer in Russia. Sebastián, welcome.
Hi, Polina. Well, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to have this opportunity to speak to you.
Great. Well, you just came from back from the Donbass, but this trip is, as an election observer, wasn't your first. Could you tell us maybe what prompted you to go there last year as a journalist and the war correspondent?
Yes, last year in August, I decided to go to Donbass because I was following the news, and for me it was very strange that every single journalist from my country and most of the Latin American journalists were covering the situation from Kiev. And of course, in that situation, you only have one perspective. So in that moment, I was in Caracas, Venezuela, and I had the opportunity to get in touch with a person who is part of an anti-fascist organization in the city of Rostov-on-Don. It's a city quite near to Donbass. It's part of the Russian Federation. And she made this speech that really touched me quite a lot, because I felt somehow that the people of Donbass was needing, some help trying to tell their story. So I decided to go there to Lugansk and Donetsk. I have done a documentary. It has a title that somehow is related to my country, because the name of the documentary is Tango de Libertad in Lugansk, which means something like freedom tango in Lugansk. The tango music is like the folklore of Buenos Aires city, which is the capital of Argentina, the country where I am right now. So I've done this documentary what really in the beginning didn't know much what to expect, what I was going to find over there. So it was very surprise for me, because there was a lot of people really wanting to tell their stories, because there was no much press in that side of the war, let's say. So I've done that documentary. It's like 6 chapters. It's on YouTube, in this small YouTube channel, which is Data Urgente. It was very surprised for me because I've done it myself. I didn't even done it for a TV station. So in Russia, because it's all spoken in Russian and with subtitles in Spanish, a lot of people have seen it. So I was like very surprised, because they didn't expect something from Latin America to go there and do this job somehow. So since that, I'm like quite involved with the situation. I could understand much more what was happening there, not only since the beginning of the military operation on February 2022, but basically since 2014, since the Euromaidan, since they have that government in Kiev that somehow was pushed there by the United States government.
Right.
So Tango de Libertad in Lugansk, it's a documentary that we really feel proud of. It's with a very small budget, but with a very big heart.
Well, and now to your second trip, what prompted you to become an international elections observer? And tell us really what you saw, because, you know, as you say, you're speaking to me from Argentina. I'm here in the belly of the beast, so to speak. And if you opened any old news channel here, the hegemonic media, they would not call it any other name except for a sham election. What did you see?
Yes, they invited us to be there as international observers, as you say. We were 35 of us. I was the only one from my country, from Argentina. I guess they invited me because of the documentary. They never say, but that is it, what I think, because I have no relation with the Russian government at all. I have no relation with any Russian media still at all. Not even with the Russian embassy in Argentina. I just went on my own. So I was quite surprised that they invited me, because sometimes for these situations they invite people related to political parties that have links somehow, maybe with the government in Russia. But they invited me. So in the beginning I was quite surprised, was a good surprise, because I didn't expect, you know, to have the opportunity to go back to Donbass a year after I have done the documentary. Let me tell you that it was quite a big experience, because, you know, having elections in a war situation, it's something hard to describe somehow. I was in Zaporozhie, basically in the city of Melitopol. Over there, everything was, at least in the city of Melitopol, it was quiet. It was like a tense calm, we can say, because actually one of the school where the people was supposed to vote was shelling the day before the election. And we had the opportunity to see the way they were organizing this voting day, because as you can imagine, the list of the people who was going to vote in a Russian election is not the same list that they used to vote in Ukrainian elections. To make this list, I guess it was not a simple thing. So one of the things, or one of the ideas of the voting office of Russia was trying to ring the bell in as many houses as they can and ask the people if they want to vote, or asking, explaining them when it's going to be, you know, the voting day, and where are they going to have the opportunity to vote. So in that way of organizing things, you have basically two people from the voting office of Russia, and for the security of them, they have to be followed for one or two soldiers. So I was very impressed that the British intelligence, the MI6, and some media in Europe, one of them I remember, Europa Press, they've been trying to tell the story that the Russian soldiers were knocking the doors, you know, and pushing the people to vote for Putin. That is absolutely nonsense. It's a big lie. So we have the opportunity to see that. It's impossible to coordinate. If a person just don't want to open the door, nothing happens. They go to the next to see if someone wants to open and explain the situation. I had the opportunity to see a person that came out of the house, and he says, my neighbors are not at home, but I had the opportunity to vote with this voting box that they have on their own backs. And he says it was good because on Sunday, when it was going to be the election day, for him was impossible to go. So to organize this election, I guess, was something very difficult. In Lugansk, I guess it was much more simple because the People's Republic of Lugansk doesn't have any more presence of the Ukrainian army. They have no more boots on the ground. But
they're not being shelled either. They're not
no,
being shelled. Mm-hmm.
sometimes with the new rockets that Ukraine has, they throw to different cities, but the people is having like a more quiet life. Let's say that. But in Donetsk, Zaporozhie and Kherson, the war still is there. So it's not easy to organize that process. So at the same time, I have to say that because I have seen the experience of last year, I have to tell you that no matter how many people was involved in the list, I can tell you that they've been waiting to vote for 8 years. That is the truth. They've been fighting, even without the support of the Russian Federation, on their own against the Ukrainian army, just because they didn't want to be part of the Ukrainian government that was made by the United States. So they were defending their own way of democracy since 2014 and waiting for this day. The referendum that took part last year on September was very successful. A lot of people voted over there, and this time, some more people had the opportunity. They have 4 political parties to vote. It was United Russia from President Putin. It was another Communist Party. Another was like a liberal party. That it was funny to me because they have the Ukrainian colors, yellow and blue, and some other whistle progressive. I don't know how you say that in English.
Yeah, progressive, sure.
Something in between, liberal and communist, progressive party.
I have to stop you here just to contrast with the Ukrainian situation where opposition parties have been banned. Any communist or socialist party, you wouldn't fight. Well, they're not holding elections now, are they?
Yeah, in Ukraine, since President Zelensky took on power, they don't even have a real parliament anymore. They don't have a justice system. So Ukraine is not living in a democracy system anymore. So at the same time, when you see what is the reality of Ukraine and what is happening in Russia, this election was for the whole of Russia, this local election, and they add, the Donbass, Kherson, Zaporozhie, and Crimea since 2014. So the atmosphere that I could see was that people really happy, having the opportunity to vote. And I have to say, I never crossed to the side where the Ukrainian troops are because I don't think it would be safe for me. Even if I haven't been there, for me as a journalist, I receive threats almost every single day just because I have done a documentary. So I wouldn't feel safe of going on the Ukrainian side because the people over there, they don't respect human rights. They don't respect, freedom of speech. So it was for me almost impossible to think and, take a look of what is happening there.
Right. Now, you mentioned threats. As a matter of fact, these are not just personal individual threats. Apparently, your name now figures on the famous Ukrainian kill list, Mirotvorets, so-called peacemaker list. That list has been around since 2014. It has ties to the SBU, to the Ukrainian security services. Very prominent people are on it, as well as people who are journalists who are now dead. Minors are on that list. Tell us about that.
Yes, for me, it's something that I didn't really expect. First, I have to tell you that another big surprise was that on September 7, this month, still, the Department of State, with the signature of Mr. Blinken, they present a script statement saying that all the international observers in the so-called Russian elections, we would have individual sanctions. They didn't say exactly what, if they would have denied visas or something different. And a week after that, actually the day after the election, the European Committee, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Germany, and the European Union itself, they print a list and gave to the press with the names of the 35 international observers. And I mean, in that list, so I was like quite surprised, because it's not only one country that is saying that they're going to give you sanctions, but now it's the whole of European Union at the same time. And as an international observer, you just go there, you see, and you tell what you see. It's incredible to see why that situation is a threat or something like that for them. And after that, as you can say, there's some kind of a list that the Ukrainian people make, to threat in journalists or people related with politics, that it's against NATO, that it's against the Kiev regime, like myself. So since the election, and sometimes before as well, they're starting to make this kind of a threat. They put me in these lists. And today there is another list where they print my address and my phone number and the exactly house of where I live. And
they doxed you. They doxed you, as they say nowadays in English. They exposed you.
Yeah. So for me, it's kind of a new situation, something that I didn't expect, but they have to understand that obviously it's not something that is going to make us scared or anything like this. I am a war correspondent. I go to the front line. I go anywhere in the world. So if these people are trying to, make us think that we better, take another job or change the subject or whatever, maybe they know they should have think, different of what are they going to do, because we have this commitment, with the truth, with the stories that we tell, to tell, what is really going on over there. So we have no support, I would say, from government here in my country, because my country is been supporting Ukrainian government. So somehow we are on our own in this situation.
Yeah, we're speaking with Argentinian journalist and correspondent Sebastián Salgado. Sebastián, you had a chance to interview Colonel Vasily Kiselov, who has been part of the armed resistance against the Kiev government since 2014 in the Donbass. He's also known as the communist commander. Could you tell us what he told you just a few weeks ago? I'm really curious to know what the state of the war is.
Yes, we had the time to make a short interview with him in the Lugansk People's Republic. I met him also last year. He's part of the documentary, and I think it was one of the best interviews that I had in the documentary. So I wanted to talk to him again and ask him if the situation have changed, because they were speaking of the Ukrainian offensive, the summer and spring offensive, and I wanted to know, if what really happened with that. And he explained me with a lot of details, an interview that we are publishing today in datargente.com. That is what the Ukrainian army is doing to recruit. Is that the word in English? To recruit soldiers. It's hard to believe and hard to understand. First, they're recruiting people that some of them are not able to walk, for example, because they have injuries before in battle, but they are recruiting them again. Some people that is not established, with in their mind. They're recruiting students, students under 18 years old. They promise them, that they will not go to the front, but they will need them in the army. So they are recruiting students, and the students basically that they couldn't pay for the private studies and the exams. So the students that are stuck in their studies, those are the ones that the Kiev regime is searching for. They are also recruiting women to go to the front because obviously they have lost so many people. They don't want to accept that fact, so they're trying to do anything. And one, perspective that this commander explained to me, he says, when you think of a country, you have to understand that those women, very young women, they need to be the mothers of the future generations. So you have to protect them, with the best what you can. You cannot send them to the front. So it's a Russian, way of seeing things over there.
Yeah.
And the worst part that he explained to me, and it's something that we've been searching and investigating, it's the way that the Ukrainian government is selling human organs from their own soldiers that they get hurt in the front.
Organ trafficking.
Organ trafficking. They've been doing this for some time. They actually changed some laws because now in Ukraine, if a hospital sells a human organ, they don't have to say anymore where is the organ comes from. And they changed the law in the last months. Actually, Maria Zakharova, who is the speaker of the chancellor, how you say in English?
I believe she's the foreign ministry spokesperson. Yes.
She made part of this investigation. We took some information from that too. And another thing which is hard to understand and hard to believe is that those soldiers that maybe they have nowhere to heal, to cure them, they gave them a lot of medicines to keep them alive, and they send them to other countries to die there in the moment they want them to die, and they take the organs out. So it's a human container for them. The soldier obviously don't know the truth. They think maybe that they go into a better hospital, but the truth is that their own body, it became a container for their own organs. So Commander Vasily made some kind of a metaphor to end the interview. He says something like, okay, now the Ukrainian dream that they will become part of Europe, it became a truth, but only small parts of the Ukrainian soldiers will live in the bodies of European citizens.
Speechless is the word, indeed. Yes. Well, I'm so glad you had a chance to have that interview and to be able to share it now with U.S. listeners, with Pacifica listeners, because this kind of story um, you will rarely hear anywhere, and it's mind-boggling. How long can this go on? From what you observed, what's the spirit of the people on the front lines? I mean, I don't know if you've spoken to soldiers as well, to the resistance, or just to ordinary people. What do they say about the prospects of so many people dying? Uh, Factors more, many times more on the Ukrainian side, apparently, although, Western media will try to make you believe otherwise. But I think the truth is coming through just more and more nowadays.
I think that the Russians are very confident because at the same time they have this moral aspect that help them so much, because it's like to see the story again, for them to fight against the fascist. They have done it in the Second World War. They are doing it again. So the people that is fighting now, they are the sons or the grandsons of the people that die for defending the same land, against fascists. So I understand that they believe in victory. We have to admit that we expect, some of the regions to be liberated sooner. From my point of view, especially Donetsk. Donetsk is exactly the same that I've seen a year ago. It's a dark city because they don't, turn on many lights because of the shelling. It helps for them to identify the places. So at 6 in the afternoon, the people rush, to their homes. So it's hard for me to understand why the front line is so near to the center of the city. So the city is being shelling still every day. I was there now just for a couple of days in the center of town. And for example, the place where I was, a taxi didn't want to take me because he explained me uh, since that this avenue until the next, they've been shelling in the last 2 weeks. So I don't go to that part of the city, and they live under that situation that for us it's hard to understand, because Donetsk is a very big city, a city much bigger than Lugansk. It's a very important place because for the coal mines and the iron and everything. So last year I was expecting that, for in the same moment this year, Donetsk to be liberated, and it's not. But at the same time, they are very confident. They believe in victory. They dream for to live in peace, every one of them, but a peace with a victory.
Talking about fascists, Canada had a fantastic moment just recently. The Canadian Parliament has just celebrated with a standing ovation an actual World War II Nazi. In what some analysts have called it a ghastly debacle. Now, is the mask coming off of the West? What's your reading?
Yes, it's the nature of Kiev regime. Sometimes they try to hide what they really are, but in some other moments, it gets as obvious as this. If you remember, Polina, in the beginning of the military operation, you had the Azov battalion, the Pravi sector, and so many others, waving the swastika, because that is what they've been doing for a long time. So for them, it's not something new. They are followers of Stepan Bandera. So that is somehow something that they should have recognized. When I was especially in Lugansk last year, I think in many places I was like the first civilian that got into places that used to be bunkers of the Ukrainian soldiers. Places they in their in ones they were hiding. And some of them were schools, factories, and as a person that is in jail, that spends many months in one small place, they start, making draws in the walls.
Right.
And for me, it was very interesting, and it's part of the documentary. The draw, the symbol that I saw, so many times, in every time, I was getting into one of those places, was the Nazi swastika. Big, painted in the walls, and it's something that for them obviously identified, the way of see the world. So when these things happening, the only difference is now that remember us that even the president is part of that fascist movement.
Even though he says he's Jewish.
He can be Jewish, but basically he's a Zionist. It's a very different thing, because you can be Christian and you can be a Zionist, like Joe Biden, for example. So the important thing is, for me, is that the Zionists, that people that support the state of Israel, they had always a lot of links with the Nazi people. Nazis and Zionists were two movements that worked together in Germany in the first part of the 20th century.
Yes, that's a history that they would much like to hide. Sebastián, I'd like to thank you so much. Is there anything that I haven't asked you about your trip to Russia, to Donbass, that you would like to add, or anything else for that matter? We've covered quite a lot of territory.
Yes, yeah, we spoke a lot. I just want to say that I'm still surprised, sometimes how hard is to get good information from many things, but especially from Donbass. So I would thank you, because these shows help, a lot for people to have at least a different perspective, a different point of view of what the corporate media are saying. In here I have a TV system with 100 TV stations, and every one of them, have the same point of view, talking about the Russian invasions and putting, the Ukrainian government as some kind of a victim. But for me, it's quite simple, because here in my country, we have a couple of islands. We call them Malvinas Islands. The British call them Falklands. And they've been occupying those islands since hundreds of years. It's a colonized, process. Yeah. We were in war with them in 1982. We lost the war, so they still over there. But basically, in Malvinas Islands, in the South Sea of Argentina, there is a NATO base. There is a NATO base where they have, nuclear submarines. They always threat us. Now they're going to sell the offshore oil, to the Israelis. There's no coincidence. in these things, So an Israeli company is going to start, getting the oil since January 2024. They have 18 holes, for getting the oil. They expect to take 80,000 barrels a day since January next year. So they still, stealing our things. NATO is our enemy. So for me, it's very simple to understand, who I am, who are the enemies of my country, and where are they now. So for me, any country that shows resistance against NATO, it's a country that I will at least try to help from with my work as a journalist, trying to tell what is happening there. So for me, it's very hard to understand how many people here is supporting um, NATO and Ukraine, because it's the same people that is still having part of our territory, our Malvinas Islands.
Thank you so much for sharing that. That's a very, very important current development, and we'll be, hopefully on my end as well, we'll be looking more into that. But for now, thank you so much. I guess maybe just briefly wanted to ask you what you think of Argentina becoming a member of the BRICS.
I'm happy. I think it's the only good thing that President Alberto Fernandez have done, but obviously he didn't work enough. Somehow we understand that President Lula from Brazil have done more for Argentina to be part of BRICS. And one example is that the President Alberto Fernandez from Argentina didn't even go to Johannesburg for the summit. So when they announced that Argentina was becoming part of BRICS, the most important thing in our foreign affairs for this government, at least in the fourth year, we have a presidential election now in October. He wasn't even there. He, not even the Minister of Foreign Affairs, no one from Argentina. So two of the candidates from the right, one is liberal. I don't know if you heard of what is happening here.
I have, yes. Maybe our audience hasn't been. We'll get into it more detail on another occasion. But go ahead. Yeah, you were talking about Javier Milei.
Yeah, Milei and Patricia Bullrich from the right side. They say if they become president, the first thing that they are going to do is, to refuse, to reject, to become part of BRICS. So that is, the kind of things that here in Latin America we have to live with, which is very difficult. Every time there is elections here, the country can move in a different direction.
Sebastián Salgado, thank you so much for speaking to Pacifica Radio.
Polina, thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure, and I hope we can speak again soon.
How should our listeners follow your work?
Okay, I have my social media. It's Seba Salgado OK. That's my Twitter or X or Instagram. But the most important thing is the YouTube channel. Is Dato Urgente YouTube. Mostly it's in Spanish, but I'm sure subtitles works.
Oh, absolutely. Fantastic. Thank you again. All right, let me stop this. Gracias mil.